everyone, and welcome back to Unwiring Minds. This is Raquel Paz Bergia, your host, and I'm here today with Dr. Ravi Iyer and Madeeha Naqvi, and they're the co-authors of Squirrels in My Brain, which I also happen to be the author of. So we're here together because we want to share about neurodiversity in the workplace and how important it is for us to have conversations about it. And actually, Dr. Iyer was here almost 2 years ago having a conversation, an introduction to the conversation on neurodiversity. And that's how we actually met. And it's been 2 long years of learning a lot and starting to make an impact on neurodiverse people around the world. So thank you both for being here with me today. I'll let you get started.
But thank you, Raquel. It was wonderful. Hi, Madeeha. Glad to see you back
Hello.
again.
Good to see you too.
So I'm just wondering a little bit, so we introduce the audience a little bit to this conversation. Why is it that neurodiversity in the workplace is a conversation at all? Why is it so important for us to be talking about this?
Oh, yeah, if you don't mind, Raquel, I'll take that. See, 20, I mean, conservative estimates is that 20% of the world's population are neurodiverse. But a lot of people, neurodiversity has become a buzzword. Like a lot of people are now using it, but somewhat the understanding of it is very mixed. Some
Mhm.
people understand it very well. Some people just think that they are people who have tics and jerks and can't focus. But if you look at the way human brains work, it's not an all or none, it's actually a spectrum. Like, for example, you'll see some people who are very good at words, very good at painting, other people are very good at math. Now, that's a spectrum of cognitive performance
Yeah.
that allows the representation of the world in either the linguistic language of words or the artistic graphic images of a painting or the symbolic representations of numbers. Now,
Mhm.
you can't, now, if you took a mathematician and demand that he actually work in an environment where painting or artistic skill or linguistic ability is, and if you were to rate him based on his performance in linguistics, it would be unfair, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we are doing to neurodiverse people. There are neurodiverse people who are have the autistic spectrum disorder or autism or ADHD or dyslexia or you know dyscalculia, but they are great in other fields. They are
Yeah.
wonderful in and they are shoehorned by the environment, by the work environment, into a straitjacketed, one size fits all kinds of definition of workplace performance and assessments. So, this fundamentally is what has been the entire neurodiversity movement that we are losing out on the abilities of 20% of the population by
Mhm.
forcing them to mirror the 80% of neurotypical people. And
Mhm.
that we can actually do much better by giving each one their own micro niche for performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, in the same subject, one thing that I think is super important to understand as well is that we see a lot of skills as, like you said, all or nothing. But with this spectrum idea, there's one type of spectrum called the spiky profiles. And that one is one that's very useful for companies, employers to mainly analyze the way that their employees are working because neurotypical and neurodiverse people have very different each person has very different spiky profile. What a spiky profile is it shows different skill sets that you need in a workplace, whether that is communication skills or it is in maybe if you work in, I don't know, in a law firm, you need certain writing skills or you need certain understanding of the law, all these different skills that are needed in your position and how well you perform in them, how well you perform in them in your normal work environment and how well you have the potential of performing in a work environment that is slightly adjusted in a way that fits you. Because imagine you walk into an office and all that you can see as you walk in is not just the office space like a neurotypical person, but you're hearing all the clutter and it's giving you a headache. you're seeing someone eat and you see like the smallest crumb fall from their mouth, and that's a complete distraction. And you're spending the rest of the day thinking, well, oh, that person, they left a crumb on the floor, and I know that that crumb is on the floor. And that's distracting me from my work, rather than a neurotypical person who may have not even seen it, or if they saw it, it might just become irrelevant in their heads. So having that understanding that there's people in our workplaces that have, whether it's a distraction or it's the noise that maybe doesn't distract them, but doesn't permit them to work to their full potential. So it's understanding that slight modifications can create spiky profiles that benefit companies and benefit also the employees, because it allows them to work at their 100% rather than maybe 50% because of limitations that they encounter due to the workplace environment. And that's something that companies, large or small, can make very slight modifications to the work environment and have great differences in the way that their employees are performing. That's just
I'm really glad you brought up these two things, and I wanted Madeeha to answer one of them, and I'll address the other. The one was the spiky profile, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time explaining what a spiky map looks like, and how that works. But Madeeha did some work in that book that we wrote on why is it that neurodiverse people tend to obsess about those small details like the crumb on the floor, and what is it about their attention to detail that makes them so good at certain things, but also makes them so abysmally. So Madeeha, why did you get into that a little bit? Because I like
Yeah,
that.
sure.
I like
Sure,
that
yeah,
chapter
that's
you
a
wrote.
very important detail because we throw around the word OCD a lot, especially in this generation. He's so OCD, I'm so OCD just because I like to be clean. We're not OCD. It's a type of neurodivergence, and the reason that such a quality, I really consider it as a quality, is important in the workforce is because it allows for great attention to detail that neurotypical people I'm not going to classify, but do tend to miss. That level of sharpness to detail is unmatched in neurodivergent individuals. And other such skills, I know Raquel, you just mentioned about how they're a great asset to a workplace. One of the other reasons is also because they have a diversity in thought. Each individual, yeah, neurodivergent or neurotypical, has their unique mindset, ideologies, and way of thinking. And neurodivergent people really have, excel in this field. And I remember one of the early conversations I had with Dr. Iyer. He was like, "Did you know Einstein was neurodivergent?" And I was like, "I did not know that." And then he went on to list five other really, really successful people who also have a neurodiversity in thought because they have a different mentality about things and they can think about things in ways most people cannot. And that I think is the biggest asset to a company. So, Dr. Iyer, I don't know if that answered your question, but
No,
I
it
do think
did.
that.
It did. So the couple of things I wanted to amplify and take away from Madeeha is two things that in today's environment, unfortunately, the word diversity and divergent has become politically a bombshell. But
Mm,
and there's one thing that we brought out in the book, rather than using the word neurodiversity and neurodivergent and diversity, equity, inclusion, I we brought out the concept of neuro-alignment, where we take it is not like I said an all or none. It is not like, oh, we're going to only accommodate and make openings for people with special skills and ignore the neurotypical, but recognize that these people, how do you align the skills of a neurotypical person, and how do you align the skills of a divergent peer person in a way that fulfills the corporate mission? The second thing is the sensory bandwidth of a neurodivergent person versus a neurotypical person is completely different. The sensory bandwidth of a neurotypical person allows them executive function to leave out a lot of the details that come in and focus on just the most important thing and try to execute. The sensory bandwidth of a neurodivergent person absorbs everything that comes in the environment. So they are sensitive to the smell. They're also sensitive to the breadcrumb on the floor, but they're also sensitive to that one character difference in a 20,000 lines of code that is the source of the bug, and they can
Yeah.
grab it. So their pattern matching skills is unbelievably different. So if a company understands this and uses them, right now companies are using it like they're using one tool to act like a screwdriver as well as a pliers as well as a spanner, instead of recognizing that each person is a different tool for a different thing. So that's where it comes to the spiky profile. A spiky profile, which Raquel said, is actually a technical word to describe a kind of cognitive performance map. It's basically concentric circles of ability. So you have social ability, you have mathematical ability, you have sensory, and then every person is graded on a 0 to 5 or a 0 to 10 scale on each one. So some person may have a point here and another point really low, like close to 0 on one other cognitive performance. And then if you connect all these points, the high points become the spikes and the low points become the valleys, and that's called the spiky profile. So it looks like as if it's like a ninja star being thrown across, and it's pretty cool once you map it. But you can clearly see where neurodiverse people excel in certain areas, where in the mountains and peaks are in detail, but they are awful in social gatherings and crowded situations. And whereas otherwise these people are excellent in this, but they are lousy when it comes to a single pointed activity requiring many hours of painstaking labor.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up the conversation on neural alignment, because actually, to be able to write this book, we had to interview a lot of people and talk to both neurodiverse people and also business owners and such. And one conversation that I remember that I think was very beneficial was when talking to a business owner, and they were saying, well, honestly, if one of my employees doesn't perform well, then there shouldn't be a reason to keep them. And I said, okay, but if you fire that employee and you hire someone else, that person might maybe improve maybe 20% performance, but maybe an investment of, say, $300, which isn't much to a company, maybe to that original employee, can make the difference and increase performance by 50%, by 60%, because that's the difference between a neurotypical and a neurodiverse person. That with neurotypical people, we might not need to adjust an environment to improve skills, but with a neurodiverse people, slight changes can make humongous differences. Those $300 invested in the work environment can change into $3 million in revenue for that year.
Yeah.
Because you just got a person that was performing maybe below average to perform way above average, just by maybe adjusting the fact that they needed headphones to work, or that they needed maybe to work facing the wall so that they're not distracted by the bird flying around or the whatever's going on. And then maybe they needed to work in a single office space instead of in a floor full of desks. Slight things, maybe. Go ahead, Madeeha, because I think that this is such an important aspect to understand.
Yeah. As Dr. Iyer said, we don't see these, we try to shift the mindset of the reader, and we don't see these as accommodations. We just see them as alignment, because, and it doesn't even have to be anything major. Like Raquel said, it could just be a matter of turning their desk in a certain way. It doesn't have to include money, but it does yield great revenue. For example, SAP has a great autism at work program. I remember covering this in the book, and some of their models, some of the adjustments that we read about were just so fascinating, because they didn't require a ton of effort, they didn't require a ton of energy or money, but they yielded great results in the end for all parties involved.
Exactly. It was just a shift in the way, in the perspective. It was a shift in their mindset of thinking these people as actually equal to the other people and just needed a specialized set of tools. It's like I once said, is if I'm a physician, and if you ask me to go and be a physician, but you tell me that I have to do that without my stethoscope, my stethoscope is a
Mhm.
necessary equipment. Just like
Yeah.
a headset for a neurodiverse person is a necessary piece of equipment. It is. You wouldn't say to someone in this day and age that I'm going to have you work, but you're not going to get a computer or you're not going to get a laptop to work. You're going to have to figure it out on paper and pencil. That is exactly the kind of account. These are necessary tools. They are not extraordinary efforts of investment and things like that. So
Yeah.
but you can read it all in the book. The book itself is is written with a view to make it to simplify the jargon, to make it more approachable for HR people, for team leaders, to
Yeah.
start thinking about how they organize and approach this whole business of integration into their workflow,
Yeah.
such that it directly impacts the corporate bottom line.
Exactly. And also mainly because if these conversations
That's
weren't
the
talked
book.
about, yeah, there you go. And if we wouldn't have these conversations and mention this, there's a huge gap that companies aren't taking advantage of. There's a great way to get to a point where companies can boost their teams. They can actually get what we call super teams, where it's just not average performance, but you have a team working together. You're making sure that the skills that each individual has are used to the maximum potential. And so neurotypical or neurodiverse, words that, we can scratch out of our head and just think about just making sure that the potential of each individual is maxed out and that we have that neural alignment in a team. And so I think that that's such an important thing that we've been able to talk about in Squirrels in My Brain, and just having a full sort of like a guidelines for companies to start thinking about these conversations. How can they build a platform in their companies that permits each individual to have that opportunity to be able to not just be average, but have 110% energy into the work that they're doing so that they can excel and that they can help the company that they're working for reach its maximum potential as well. So I
We
think
enjoyed this. We
that's
enjoyed the work we did on this so
yeah.
much that we are actually writing a second sequel to this called Acorns of Wisdom. That is more workbook oriented, more training manual oriented towards HR people, and you will see that coming out in a few months.
Yeah,
We are just working on the outline.
Yeah.
exactly. No, well, thank you so much, y'all, for joining me today, Dr. Iyer, Madeeha. I appreciate your time. I think that we got to share a great conversation and the audience got to learn a lot. So thank you so much for joining me today.